All right. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to wait a moment here for some other attendees to kind of pile in, and then we will get started. Okay, it actually looks like we are kind of capped out here. Our attendees has stopped gaining. So welcome everybody to our ongoing webinar series. Today we're going to be going over phase 5 rollouts. Joining you today is myself, Victoria Anderson, and we've also got Cheryl Clapp and Greg Johnson on here for heading the questions window and the Q&A at the end. All of our sessions are recorded and placed on the help desk, as well as more help documents. So please go check those out and check your email too for the release notes. If you're not finding what you're needing on the help desk or you're not getting release notes, please reach out to support and submit a ticket so we can fix that. While we're in the content, you'll be muted for the presentation. So please enter your questions into the questions window or save them for the end of our Q&A. So let's go ahead and jump into the demo. So today we have several new features and enhancements we're going to be looking at today, including an itemization transaction mapping interface, some manual account add itemization fields, and we also made some updates to the consent to call feature and a client compliance rule as well. So we're going to look at the itemization mapping feature first. But before we go into that, I do want to go back to an account and review some of the itemization transaction elements. I think it'll help make things make more sense. So let's go to a sample account here. And we're going to go into the itemization sidebar tool here. So our new itemization mapping has to do with how these three fields here are calculated. So before, what transactions went into which of these fields was not editable, but now we have made a new feature to where you can map to where these transactions go in these fields. If your itemization transaction entries are acting as expected or as needed, you likely won't need to make changes to the mapping that you're going to see here in a moment, and just go ahead and leave the defaults. So this is now the new mapping feature is under the setup menu. And now when you go down to compliance here, you'll notice there's actually a breakout here. So this the new feature is this itemization mapping. All of the other compliance features or settings are going to just be in the settings field. This should look pretty familiar to you if you've been going to our webinars. So let's go back to our new feature here, itemization mapping. And this is where the mapping occurs. And I'm going to show you how to read the screen and how to kind of set this up. So on the left-hand side here, you're going to notice all your buckets. And then along the top, you'll see the owing and receiving operators. What I have here are the system defaults and what you'll see in your portal before making any changes. You will notice here that there is a pattern with these the fields here, with the exception of interest. So why could you need to change any of these defaults? You know, for example, you may need certain values to show up in the itemization fee field for the validation notice rather than the payments or credits field. This itemization mapping page is where you can make those changes and where those values will land. Again, however, unless you have a specific use case, you'll likely just continue to use these defaults. If you're unsure if the defaults are right for your agency, please reach out to support and we'll be happy to help you. So let's show how to map an itemization transaction, and we're going to start with this principal bucket, and then we're going to go left to right, going over these fields. You'll notice that each of these has a drop-down menu, and you can select which of those calculated fields the transaction will end up in. So I'm actually going to bring up a helper screen here. This is just a screenshot of the account that we were just in, and I'm going to put it right up under this principal bucket and kind of use this to connect the dots when you're mapping where it's going to end up on that transaction screen. So here we have our principal. Our owing positive transactions are going to end up here in this plus fees bucket. Next, when we're looking at owing negative in the transactions in the principal bucket, it's going to end up in this minus payments and credits bucket. And then for our, again, principal received positive transactions are going to end up in this payments and credits field here. And then lastly, our received negative principal transactions are going to end up in this payments and credits calculated field here. If you remember, you cannot type in any of these fields. You can only type in this balance as of itemization date field here. These are all calculated. Okay, so then lastly on this screen here, we'll get rid of this. There is one more checkbox here, itemization exclusions. It says exclude, cancel, and reactivate transactions. This feature has very specific use cases. Most of you will leave it off. So if you suspect you may need it, please reach out to support and we can help you work through that. One other thing that we decided to add to help you navigate where transactions are ending up in those calculated fields, we added a little helper field. So let's go back to an account so I can show you where that is. And basically it tells you where that transaction has been mapped. So right back in our itemization sidebar tool, I'm just going to go ahead and click on one of these itemization transactions here. You'll notice that there's a new field called itemized as, and you can see that it's in that minus payments and credits calculated field. Okay, so that was our new itemization mapping feature. We're going to go to the manual account add screen next. Last time on our last webinar, we looked at a way to manually add itemization information and transactions through the client access screen. We replicated that into the account add screen. So we're going to go back to our accounts here and new account. And you'll notice that when I scroll down to the section, you'll notice that it is, let me reduce the summary section here, that it is identical to the one in client access. So we're just gonna demo through this again, just in case you missed our webinar last week to see what this looks like. So first things first, we're gonna go ahead up here and enter in some information, and we're gonna do our sample one client here. If you have presets in the client profile for the itemization description and date source, you'll notice that they're autofill here. This particular client is the charge-off date. So when you go to enter a charge-off date up here in the debt information section, it will autofill down at the bottom. So let's get a date here. Okay, and let's enter in some other information. Let's get some principal here. The fee. Okay, you'll notice that my charge-off date is now into this itemization section, and we can begin filling this out. So let's enter in a itemization date. Oops. Or excuse me, an amount. You'll notice that when I have an itemization balance here, it's also going to be calculating this mismatch here down at the bottom. So currently we have a mismatch of $20. What's fancy about this is if you have a mismatch, the account cannot be placed. So the mismatch needs to be solved before you can place the account. And the reason why we have a mismatch is because we need to enter in our itemization transaction. Okay, we're going to do payment here to the principal. One thing that's important to know that this new itemization screen here in the manual account add and in the client access, both are going to follow the mapping rules that you set if you are going to change the defaults. So if you change them there, those will also be reflected here in the manual account add and in client access. Okay, so I've got my transaction added. You can see that you can add more transactions if needed, and you'll see that I now no longer have an itemization mismatch, and my account can now be placed. You can see by the blue button here. So the next feature we're going to look at is our updated consent to contact feature. We're going to go to an account page so I can show you what I'm talking about. A few phases ago, we rolled out I think it was phase 3, we rolled out this consent to contact feature. So if you would like to get to know this feature and see how to set it up, the phase 3 webinar is recorded on our help desk, so you can go check that out. But what we've done to this feature to update it is the first one we did is we got some feedback from you guys to move it. So we have moved it down here to below the phone result contact fields. So that's one thing we did to update it. But the other thing we did is added the ability to remove this from the notate count field altogether. And that can be removed from a permission role. So this permission role in general is nested under multiple roles. However, we're just going to go look at it from the agent role. So let's go to, oops, I need to make my screen a little bit smaller here. Okay, let's go to user profiles and let's get rid of this and just go look at a sample. Let's go to a sample collector. And we're going to go under the agent role. Again, this is nested under many roles, but we're going to look at it here. And now that we're in the agent role, I'm going to bump open the permissions here. And I'm going to use Control Find and then look up the role. It is called Account Debt Consent Contact Update. This guy here. So by removing this permission, you'll no longer have that field appear on the notate account screen. If you would like to have this removed from your notate account screen for your agents or other users, please reach out to support and they will assist you in removing those. All right, so lastly, we've added a Boolean to the client profile. We're going to go to a client profile really quick. Let's go to our sample 1 client. And this is going to be in the preferences section. Okay, where are you? Here we are. Obey compliance rules. So this is a new Boolean that we added for your clients which are not affected by Regulation F requirements or need to be excluded from demographic limitations. This field is going to be on by default, so you'll want to go turn it off. And again, it's in this preferences section of the client profile. All right, so that is actually the end of our content today. So before we go ahead and jump into our Q&A at the end, I do want to go over some of the expected Phase 6 releases. I do want to note that we've been moving around a lot of the features as they've been, figuring out what's important to you guys and what's not. So keep that in mind. But this is what is expected for the Phase 6 releases. So we're expecting to do a client access and manual and easy, quick add for itemization transactions. So when being able to just have one balance instead of entering in a bunch of trans. An account assignment ETL loader to include some itemization transactions, including interest, fees, payments, and credits. A simplified agent and virtual agent opt-in method for communication channels such as email, text, phones, and letters, as well as a simplified opt-in method for when payments and payment plans are set up. the ability to recalculate itemization balances, the ability to update client profiles via ETL, and being able to email links for opt-outs, excuse me. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up the floor for Q&A. You are double muted, so you're muted by myself, and then you'll be muted by default. So if you would like to speak up, please make sure that you unmute yourself as well. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you all, and we can begin our Q&A. Okay, you should all be unmuted. So again, if you'd like to speak, you'll just need to unmute yourself because you are muted by default.
It's a quiet room today, Victoria.
I guess so.
I think everyone's getting a little overwhelmed and saturated with Regulation F, right? If
Definitely.
anyone's trying to ask questions and having any trouble, go ahead and post something in the questions window and we'll bring it up. Hello?
Yes, I was curious if any of the other agencies have already tested with this and how has it been?
Tested with which
With the
parts
whole
of
Reg F features added, right now we're still testing. We want to implement with some new clients, but we haven't really gone in there to play around with the new features.
Yeah, we have quite a few, or at least I know at least a handful, but I would say several customers that we know of that are working through these processes. It's certainly not an easy thing. It's not quick and it's, it's not do one or two things. It's a lot of setup, right? And finding
Right.
out what you can get from the client in terms of data to help you with itemization data, or if you already have it, verifying with your legal teams that whatever you're going to use for that data is going to match the legal requirements per your business and your business model. So it's a great question, actually, because I know everybody's struggling with it, but we do have customers that are working through each piece of that information. Again, some are reaching out to their clients, getting different files, changes to the files. Some are working with their legal teams to make sure that whatever they're doing, they're doing getting as close to things as they can. So it's kind of hard to dig into specifics because there's a lot of moving parts,
Yeah.
validation notices and channels of delivery and the things that we don't have done yet in ACE, right? We have some things that are done and we're continuing to do more and more.
Yes. Makes sense.
It doesn't seem like we have a lot of questions. So if anyone has questions that are related to Reg F in general and not regards to our specific content today, please feel free to ask those as well.
Hi, I was just looking for clarification, something I was not aware of, so sorry I'm behind the ball on this one. We don't have to put the itemization screen in balance for payments received after the validation notice was sent, true or false?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that?
Sure. So I send out my validation notice. The itemization screen is in balance with the charge-offs, payments, or I'm so sorry, the payments and credits, any charges after the itemization date. So everything's in balance when the account is input. The consumer then makes a $20 payment to us after receiving the validation notice.
So
do I need to be changing the itemization screen at that point to keep it in balance, or no, that's only relevant until the notice goes out?
No, so what's going to happen when that payment comes in? So because it's after itemization and after assignment, right? So the itemization transactions that you're entering in itemization transactions or loading to itemization transactions would be for anything after itemization, before assignment, right? Date-wise. date range wise. And then when you post a payment after assignment, what's going to happen is that payment will show up. Like it'll be calculated into that plus interest, plus fees, minus payments and credits, right? One of those three, it'll be calculated in based on your mapping again, right? But you don't have to enter it as a separate transaction. And the reason that that'll continue to be calculated in there is that if let's say your validation notice bounces, but somehow you ended up with a payment in between or an adjustment to the account balance that happened after assignment, right? These balances will be accurate to date if you should have to reschedule that validation notice. And your validation information will be correct. So you'll be able to go and look at these balances and see that they're correct to date after other activities happened following assignment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying.
You bet.
Good question. All right, any other questions?
I have a quick question for our folks that are out there. That itemization mapping that Victoria demonstrated, is there anyone here who, and this is just a question because we really don't think it's going to apply to a lot of our customers, but is there anyone here who happens to think that's something they're going to be likely to use, where they want things to land in a different place or need them to?
Is that based on client or just overall?
It's overall, it's system wide. Yeah, yeah.
Or I mean, to Jen's question, I mean, are you talking about per client or per transaction or?
The mapping is global. The mapping that we're talking about here and this itemization mapping, or were you talking about a different question? Brent, did you have a different question? Or did that address it? That may have been a question about something else. I'm not sure. I think we can. Anybody else? Anybody? I think the reason I brought that topic up was because I think that so far we've only heard of it or worked through it in context with some insurance pieces. And I don't know if there are other scenarios where people would need to do that. I was just kind of curious, but we may not have anyone on the call who would have other scenarios. All right, thank you.
All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and end our webinar. If you think of something later, please feel free to shoot your question to support and we'll go ahead and get that answered. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone, and we will see you next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye.